Many of you know and recognize just immediately that the problem note, if you want to call it that, the opportunity note perhaps, in this context is the note D, which is the fifth of the G chord. G is one or root, B is the third, D is the fifth, and the F sharp, as we've talked about, is the seventh above that chord, a major seventh. And you're going to run into that same major 7 sound if you're playing the fifth of the C chord, if you're playing a part of the melody that has a G melody note. The seventh above that, or the third above that G note, would be the note B, which is the major seventh as to that C chord. We don't have a G melody note above a C chord in O Susanna, so I can't illustrate it to you in this particular context, but that is true. And so you're going to run into a similar situation above when you're playing the fifth of the chord of the moment over all the chords. It exists there on the minor chords as well. If we were to play an A minor chord, we had a melody over the A minor part. If we had that is one of the chords in the key of G, and if we had a melody that went A, C, D, E, A, C, D, E, and we're using it in the key of G, you would have this. The fifth of the A minor chord is the note E, and the third above it, the 7 of the A minor chord, would be the note G. And so you could, rather than playing that E-A pair, play E-A and have this. Instead of now, to my ear, that does not present as glaring, or it's not as iffy as playing the major seventh above the C chord and the G chord, and you may find that you like it just fine. Also remember, there may be times over that G chord, if you're just passing through that D F sharp pair going somewhere else and you're not lingering on it, it may sound absolutely fine. A lot of players, though, if you're playing that G chord in the key of G, just sort of have yourself programmed to always have that pair, that D-G pair, but it doesn't necessarily sound bad in all contexts. Now, what about the D chord? People know, of course, that the seventh above the D chord in the key of G, it is the note C. It's not a major seventh. It is a half step below the root of the chord in question, the problem you have with the G major and the seventh and the C major seventh chord. We have the note C, and the 5 chord can be played as a seventh chord, will sound good in almost all contexts, and so you might think, well, you don't really have that problem there because that's the way it's supposed to sound. Here's the D right there. That A-C pair would be the 5th and the 7th, respectively, of the D 7th chord, and so you don't have that problem, right? You may find that actually you may like the sound of the perfect fourth instead of A-C, A-D in that context too. I like it a lot better sometimes than having the 7th as played over the D chord in that context. So you may like the perfect fourth on the D chord as well. Another note that bears mentioning in regard to the D chord or the D 7th chord is if the melody note over the D chord in the key of G is the melody note C, the 7th of the D chord, there may be times there when you don't like the third above it as well. The third above that note C, of course, is the note E, and as to a D chord, that E note is the 9th of the chord. doesn't sound bad. There are some times when I think it sounds better personally, rather than having that ninth, to be playing the D note instead. That's a second rather than a third. And there may be times when you think that it sounds better using that D note for the C note, the 7, the B note if that's the way your melody goes, and the A note as well. One other thing I want to mention is that we've been playing this with the melody note on the bottom and the harmony note on the top, and a lot of times you can play the harmony note on the bottom as well. It's going to sound just as good, especially if it's a melody your listener knows. They're going to automatically pick out the melody note, whether it's on the top or the bottom. If you're playing chord and melody guitar, the melody note's on the top. If you look in your hymnal at church, you're going to see the melody note is going to be the top note, and all the harmony voices are below it. And so on the chorus of O Susanna, if we're playing it in the way that we have been doing it, we could play, rather than playing the harmony note above, we could move it below. We would play AC if we did that, but we know better than that. We're going to put the G, a chord tone, on the bottom. And I likewise played a 4th down there on the bottom. And so you have some flexibility there, and you can do that for convenience. Sometimes if your melody note is going too high, you've got to go way up on the neck, and you can just play a melody, play a harmony on the bottom instead, and it will sound just fine. Now that's kind of the basics of major scale playing. I do want to show it to you in some other positions, and we need to look at playing in minor keys or minor sections of major scale tunes, and we want to look at playing sixths. But I feel the natives are getting restless out there and would want to play something a little more useful to rock and roll or other popular music, and so we're going to turn our attention to that. Before we do, I just want to show you the harmonized major scale completed in that 3rd position, starting on the E string. A lot of times playing on the lower strings don't sound that great. In playing thirds, it can sound a little muddy, but it does have its uses for rhythm playing and so forth. And in order to connect positions, it's going to be useful to know what the entire width of the neck. And so let's take a look at that. Here is the G major scale harmonized from the low E string, that 3rd fret low string, on up to join our octaves that we looked at before. And so you start off with GB, AC, BD, CE, DF sharp, EG, F sharp A, G.